Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I am absolutely thrilled. I know we've been trying to work on getting together for quite a long time. So Beate Chelette, thank you so much for being here today. You are known as an authority, a growth architect. You've done some really phenomenal things, and you have an origin story that I think is very familiar to many of us. I am not a first generation immigrant. I'm a second, but I'm a single mom, and I've had many financial struggles and things happen in my life going from one to the next. So I know that that's part of your story, and I'm really excited to share your journey. So thank you, Beate, for being here.
Annika, I'm excited to be here and to help hopefully inspire your audience and give them some good stuff that they can walk away encouraged and empowered to go and find their spot in the world and make their impact.
Yeah. And that's something I think a lot of people, the last few years, people started thinking more about that. What do I want the rest of my life to look like? How do I make an impact? So I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your journey coming to the country, having to go through difficulties, being in debt, and then going from that to massive success, selling a company to Bill Gates, and then helping inspire and motivate people to find their purpose, passion, and be able to grow in that now.
Yes. So the story is probably not unlike many stories that you hear. It might be even like your own story where you feel that the place you're in is not right, or it's too confined, or it feels restricted. And I grew up in Germany. I came to the United States when I was 23. And I did that after I was a photographer, photo editor at Elle magazine. I figured out very quickly that I was better at the business side behind creativity, even though I love creativity. And I love working with creative people. And I love working with, I call them non-conforming, colorful, opinionated. And in the simplest of terms, I help people land planes, so a lot of people just want to fly at 30,000 feet and just you look how beautiful it is and then never land the plane. You don't do that, you crash.
Wow.
So I come in and I say, well, we need to look at a few things. What's the terrain look like? What's the journey going to look like? Where are you going to take this plane? And because I knew how to deal with, it's sort of really these extraordinary people, I got into artist representation and still photography production, and I did that here in Los Angeles. And I had really a decade of just bad luck and lots of tragedy. And I married a man, and, he was perfect. He had two flaws. He was an alcoholic and a pathological liar. And that didn't work out. And then I was pregnant while there were the riots and everything went up in flames. And then I had a 6 months old, and then there was this big, huge earthquake. And I had been laid off like in the middle of this like massive post-recession, in the recession, going into this earthquake. And it's just like one thing after the other. It just kept coming and coming and coming. And there's a point where you go, man, this is just ridiculous. But I've got myself to, whatever, 300,000, 500,000. I fell back. And then eventually I'm running $1 million company. And I'm going like, yeah, I'm in the 4%. Boom, here it is, smooth sailing from here on forward. And then I got this feeling that my assistant or employee at the time, that something wasn't right, and she just had an attitude, and she wasn't doing her work, and something was right. So I fired her, and then it turns out that she had come up with an idea for her own business with my key vendor, which was my business, without me. Next thing I know, and I find out by calling my clients, calling in for invoices, and my clients are going like, we already paid the invoices. Who she paid the invoice to? Oh, to the two of them. I said, what do you mean? I wrote the invoice. Oh, they said you were out of business and that you hadn't paid them and they were really worried. I said, you can't do that. And then the clients were like, well, don't put us in the middle of this. I'm like, you did put yourself in the middle of this. I didn't put you in anything. You should have at least had the decency after we worked together for years to call me and say, hey, what's the story with it? And so I sued them both because I didn't know any better and I needed to be right. Would I have known at that time that this lawsuit wasn't against them, but against one of the largest insurance companies in the country?
Oh.
Because they were under a group insurance for photographers that covered errors and admissions. And I didn't know that lying and stealing is an error or an admission, but apparently it seems to be covered under law when you steal and lie. And so I'm now in this huge lawsuit. And I mean, I'm going into debt fast because this division is gone. I'm going deep into debt. I have my child. I'm, going through a divorce. Then I think, well, production season is coming. I'm working with Levi Strauss, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, big brands. I mean, everything is great. And then September 11th comes. And in one day, it wiped out $500,000. Like, just gone. Like, gone. With the towers, there went all the jobs. And then I was like, I think I'm in trouble now because I didn't know how to get out of it. But we played the game. We were able to settle the lawsuit a couple months later.
Oh.
And then I literally had zero because I was able to pay off the debt that I had incurred up until then after the attorney fees and everything. And then I had nothing. And then I started again and building the stock photography syndication business where we were licensing images, everything around the home. So if you go into your bank and it says behind the teller, refinance your house, that would be our image. If you go to IKEA and you look at that famous photo of the black and white photo with a red bike leaned against the canal railing, and you look at the fine print, it says Beate Works. I think that has sold to date over 3 million times or 5 million, some astronomical number worldwide. That was an image that we licensed to them. But I had no money. So now I'm $135,000 in debt. And it's game over.
Whoa.
I mean, there's no more money to get. I'm maxed out on everything. I have to borrow money to pay interest on borrowed money. I mean, we're going down. And then I went to Germany to drum up some business on a conference, meeting with other people. My father has a stroke. My father didn't have a stroke. My father had pancreatic cancer. So now my dad dies. So now I have my best friend, my biggest supporter. He's dead. I have no money. I'm paying for funeral and money I don't have. I have no idea what I'm going to do. My phone rings, and it's my office from Los Angeles. I'm literally at the grave. And it says, well, Beate, sorry to hear about your dad, but we've just been served a notice, so now I'm losing the house. All right, so this is the point of no return, right? Dramatic music plays, the woman breaks down crying, whatever. I fell down, I raised my fist, and I yelled at God, and I said, you know what, if you have a plan, this would be a really good time to fill me in because this just makes no sense. I mean,
I'm speechless, which is why I'm not interjecting with questions. You usually hear somebody has one or two things that happen, but this succession of things that happened.
On and on and on it went. It just wouldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. And then finally, I just surrendered and I said, okay, fine. I need to get a bankruptcy attorney. It's game over.
Yeah.
I got back to Los Angeles not too long after I get a letter from the White House. The White House. From the President of the United States. And it says the President sends his best wishes. Now, let's just be really clear. The President, of course, never saw this letter, right? But it came from the White House. But because I had written a letter to the President, which I only did because my former mother-in-law was an absolute nag. You got to write to the President of the United States. He's the number one guy in the country. If anybody can help him, it's him. Have you written the letter to the President of the United States? Yes. Why are you not writing the letter to the... Fine. I'm going to write the letter. And we will never have to have this conversation again. Until I get a letter from the White House. And then that put me in touch with a Small Business Administration, which is a government organization supporting small businesses with funding and other help. And because they also got a letter from the White House, it went to the second in command. Not some underling, but the second in command, who then called me and says, why didn't you just call me in the first place? And I'm like, it never even occurred to me that I could just pick up the phone and call you.
No.
And he says, yeah, but that's what we're here for. So I went in and they helped me to find a bank that took all my credit card debt and refinanced it in a 10-year fixed loan.
Oh.
That freed up my line of credit, $45,000.
Oh.
It brought me to break even in 3 months. So between bankruptcy and break even, it was 3 months.
Amazing.
18 months later, I'm the world leader in my category.
Wow.
I'm licensing into 79 countries because I have all these great home stories from all these architectural and interior photographers that worked with A-listers because they are A-listers and they work with other A-listers. Madonna, Blink, Naomi Campbell, Francis Ford Coppola, Simon Baker, Terry Hatcher, Seal. They just kept coming. And because I was a photo editor at Elle magazine, I knew how to sell these stories.
Right. Yeah.
And so I built my international syndication network.
Amazing.
And then a Bill Gates company comes and says, can you tell us how you do it? And I said, no. You want it? You buy it. They said, how much? I said, millions. And they said, fine.
Hey.
That's the story.
Wow.
What a journey. What a journey of perseverance and attitude that you can keep going, that you can keep doing it. You use the skill set that you knew you had, that you'd always had. And even though other people try to take it away from you, you fought back and look at what happened. Just an amazing journey. And kudos to you. I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of those experiences and that heartbreak to get there.
Well, if you look at it now from a spiritual mindset perspective, or if we look at this now with what I know now and what I can share and want to share, if you look at the spiritual principles or universal laws, it always says the same thing, is you make a decision. And then you burn the bridges and the boats, because there has to be no other alternative other than that way, because that's the decision you made. So if you go to the store and you want to get an avocado, you will go to the store, you will get an avocado. If they don't have an avocado, but the recipe, if you make guacamole, you know you need avocados. You're going to not stop until you find your avocados.
Right.
It might not be that store, it might be another store. But the thought of, I'm just not going to make guacamole because it's Mexican night in my house is not an option. And so I made that decision. This is what I was going to do. And there was no other alternative. It was this or failing in flames, going down in flames. This is what coined my famous quote, I will not drown in a puddle. If I drown, at least I'll drown in the ocean.
Yeah.
So I made the decision and then I took action. And I believed that somehow this was all going to come together, which I had absolutely no evidence of. None. Neither did I have the skill set to run a global company, nor did I, have any idea how to do any of these things. But you figure it out when you have to. So I made the decision, took the action consistently, and I just wouldn't give up until I got there. And then you look at what's all my perceived failures of, she wasn't a good enough photographer. Well, she was better at the business. Well, that ended up being a good thing. Because I knew what a good photographer was and what a bad photographer was, I understood enough about photography to have the credibility. I was a photo editor at Elle magazine, which I liked but didn't love because I didn't like the way women operate in fashion magazines. It's everything you think. So that helped me then building up the international syndication network because I knew how that worked. So that was part of that. I ran a production company, so I knew how to manage teams from all over the world that came together. I'm from Germany, so I have global experience. I ran a global company. And so all these pieces now suddenly, the photographer representation, I knew what photographers needed. I knew what they needed to hear. I knew that they had no way to make passive income other than through stock photography syndication because it's time for money. So I could make them the exact offer to give them what they needed. So that became a benefit. And so all these pieces that I had that seemingly failed were all building blocks that led to that thing that then became the thing.
Yeah.
And that is part of the beautiful but sometimes painful journey of entrepreneurship, where I think that go through things and they're not failures, right? They're lessons. As you said, they're building blocks to get you to the next point. But I think another thing that a lot of people deal with, and perhaps this is something that you do now and help people with, is you have an idea, you're all in on the idea, but then something else comes up as an opportunity. And so you think, oh, I'm supposed to do that opportunity that's going to create, maybe it's more stability, more income, whatever the pain point that you have in your life is right now. So then you put your other thing, the thing that you really want to pursue on the back burner. And sometimes it feels like, because I know that I've had this experience many times in businesses, and I'm sure many people listening have as well. Oh, was I not supposed to say yes to that? Was that just a test of the universe? And I was really supposed to keep going down this road where I would burn the bridges and I would have to burn the boats, burn the bridges, and just have to go all in on what I'm really passionate about?
Well, that's a differentiation between being an idea addict and between being in tune with your inner voice.
Okay.
So the idea addict is addicted to the newness of an idea and then the thought of, I could make it happen if I wanted to, and then gives up before it comes to fruition, starts over and over and over and over again, and never really succeeds in any one thing. The person that follows the thought, and I'm actually listening to a book right now that I recommend everybody who has ever thought about this exact question. It's called The Surrender Experiment. And the Surrender Experiment is by a gentleman who really just wanted to go into meditation and be a yogi, and that's it. And then he recognized that part of surrendering was to stop listening to that voice in your head that interprets everything that happens to you, and to trust that what is being brought in front of you is there for a reason. So if you read The Surrender Experiment, it's just mind-boggling, how this goes from the guy basically sleeping in the car to running a company with 2,300 people in the software industry and making a fortune. And all because when he said, that's crazy, I don't know how to do that, at the right time, the right thing was always in front of him, but he was really in tune with his inner voice, with his spirituality. He just learned how to differentiate between what his intuition and the real voice said versus what the chatterbox, the people call it the ego, what that voice interprets, because that voice goes to all of our past experiences and will tell us everything that we shouldn't be doing because it wants us to keep at status quo and keep us safe. I think that's the biggest challenge in everybody's life. And I think that's the difference between success and not being super successful, is that you have to say, what am I going to listen to? I'm going to give you a very concrete example because this literally just happened to me again for I don't know the gazillionth time. So, 8 years ago, I did a program with a online provider by the name of Creative Life called Turn Your Talent into a Business. And it was a super success. I mean, I think over 25,000 people have taken this course.
Gosh, amazing.
And I then afterward really had wanted to not do the entry level kind of business building, but I had wanted to help people with the systems and the growth strategies, people that had, $500,000, $1 million businesses really going to that next level. And I kept pushing that, and we were doing well. And then this year came. And then there was, it's almost like this is the after COVID year where such a massive shift happened in the industry where I think people, they bought enough high ticket items. They have enough learning piled up that it's going to take them another 3 years just to listen to everything that they've bought.
I'm probably one of those people.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you're at a point where you go, I'm overwhelmed because I have all these different things that I need to draw from. And now we're in decision paralysis because what do I do now? Because I have so much. So I know intuitively, you have everything, but logically, what's the thing, the domino that then makes all these other things fall into place?
Right.
So I looked at all of this, and we had a hard time with sales in the beginning of the year, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And so I finally, I work with a high performance coach, so I finally got really quiet, and I said, okay, so what do I need to pay attention to here? And then my salesperson that I hired said to me, oh, by the way, I just looked into Google Trends, and I saw that certification is a term that outperforms searches for Trump, which is huge.
That is huge. Well,
So what does that mean? That means that people are looking to get certified, not certified in something, just certified. So that means that they're looking for all opportunities to figure out what could I get certified in with only one conclusion. I'm going to do something for myself.
Yeah.
Not for somebody else, for myself. So that means that the influx of people that wanting to become entrepreneurs is probably about to explode.
Interesting.
Looking at that, I listen to the voice in my head that goes, can't go back there again. You passed that. Look at the clients you've worked with. You worked with Amazon. You worked with makers of Lysol. You worked with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. You've done all these things. Why are you even considering this thing again? And then there was my intuition that says, but I have the shortcuts. I mean, my story is nuts. I have the shortcuts. I know exactly what you should not be doing or what you need to avoid or what you can expect because I've done it and I've got the bruises and the scars to show it. So we went and we literally pulled it back out and we said, what matters to people right now? And it's the thought of freedom. Freedom of time and freedom of money. And they have figured out that corporations lie through their teeth. There is no safety, no security, white picket fence for freaking whom? Where?
Exactly.
In Ohio, where you can, nothing against Ohio, where you can still afford to buy a house with a white picket fence, certainly not Los Angeles. So I think people are looking to redefine what their dream is.
Yeah.
And with that, that's now that voice that came through and says, who am I now that I know it? And now that I feel that this is really true, who am I with all this experience that I have? And once again, everything I've ever done falls magically into place. And that's, I think, the difference between the attachment to what you think it needs to be and then what you're being asked to be.
That's very powerful. Are you ready to take your brand to new heights? Join the Brand Amplifier for Entrepreneurs program. Learn how to build, elevate, and amplify your brand with a comprehensive 10-module course. Learn more about it and other ways to implement our strategies at fullcapacitymarketing.com. Click on EFCM Learning Hub for more information. Can't wait to help you amplify your brand. I haven't said this in my past several interviews, but sometimes when I'm interviewing somebody, I realize that they're giving the message to my audience that I need for myself right now. And that's how I feel about this conversation. Yeah, because everything you're saying. So we're going to be talking after this. Definitely. But
those are the best interviews, because I also think that, and I have literally like my goosebumps are standing and I work a lot, as you probably can tell, with intuition. So I'm pulling this, I don't think about this before I go in an interview. I know I'm guided. So I know that what you need to hear is what I'm going to say. This is not even a question in my mind. And when I get the goosebumps, I know spirit's present because that's how I work. And I always say that I work with a lot of people that are activated and only activated people know what that means. And everybody else is just not my audience. And that's really the message here for your audience is that if there's something in this podcast or any other podcast, and while we at it, will you please do me a huge favor? If you're listening to this podcast, wherever you pick it up, will you go there now and subscribe to it and leave a 5-star review and a comment? And here's why comments matter so much. Even if you just put a little green heart in it that says you listened to this entire episode, because it teaches the algorithm that you actually engaged in this podcast. And that shows that there's an interest for this content to more people. And that's what Annika does. It's a labor of love. So show her some love and then share this episode with one other person.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So I'd love to talk more about what exactly is a growth architect and what is the Women's Code? And
so,
what's your work look like? Oh, and then what does your work look like today?
Yeah, so as the growth architect, I picked this particular tag because I feel like I'm always building something and I'm helping people build something. And I said I help people land planes. Really, I architect the strategy, the workflows, the processes, so that people that have these ideas, but where it's just not connecting. So I literally crawl into their minds, look for the puzzle pieces, pull them out, and then we assemble them. And then people walk out. And it is not uncommon that within days, weeks, that after we work together, they start landing bigger jobs just because the language is clearer and it's connected and it's a consistent client transformation journey. So that's what I do is I help people really to see what they are. And I give you one example so you kind of see how this works in action. I met this woman, and this is a pro bono thing, so I'm not getting paid for this. And she was walking at a pitch competition where I was a judge around in this amazing overall. And then she told me she was working, with the homeless, trying to raise money. So I said, call me, I'll mentor you. So she calls me and she tells me this complicated story and this overall, and it's a very complicated piece to sew, and it's $400. And, it's cost prohibitive, but how do we get this in front of people? And she has this idea. She's a documentary filmmaker. And I'm listening. Annika, and I'm listening. And I said, nope. I said, you got this all wrong.
Good.
I said, you are not thinking big enough. I said, you know how to tell a story. You're a documentary filmmaker. I said, we are in the city of Los Angeles with the largest homeless problem in all of the country because everybody drops their homeless people off here because they don't freeze to death in the winter, generous as they all are. We have so many propositions that have been passed. We have billions of dollars sitting for homeless. And the one thing that doesn't exist is re-entry into workforce programs. And she goes, oh, I could then maybe if I talk to the LA Mission and then we identify women that are ready for re-entry and we work with a fashion district and we teach the women how to sew and then they could get jobs. I said, look at that. She's already done her first pilot program.
I am so that's amazing.
So it's there. You know what I mean? It's all there. It just that sometimes it just takes somebody to look at it and say, that's not the call. The call is way bigger than that. So now the mission for her is to connect women that have met all the criteria for re-entry. And I said, you need to meet the mayor. She says, I don't know how to meet the mayor. I said, you need to meet the mayor. You need to get the money. I said, and you're going to be working on your pitch deck. So I sent her the pitch deck. I told her exactly what she needs to do. I said, you need to do your research. She says, the numbers are ridiculous. I said, of course they are. And guess what my next client is? A company that recycles clothing.
Yes.
So they can donate clothing and fabric to sew these pillows and other things that can be sold. The homeboy industry model already exists.
Exactly.
Which is the best model for re-entry after incarceration. So the model, we just have to follow the model. And then this other company, LA Vintage, is going to get free publicity by donating their clothes.
Yeah.
And it's magic.
It really is. Yeah. And as a documentarian, she knows the storytelling aspect.
Match
And
made in heaven, yeah.
the strikes are still going on, so we need content. That is so beautiful. And I can see how it really is. It's a mix. It's like the alchemy, right? It's not just the business acumen, but you have to have that magic and that energy, that spirit to be able to put them together and create something that's bigger.
I think so. So that's what I do, is I work with people that are mission-driven or impact-driven, that are here because they are called to do something, and then I help them to develop the systems and strategies wherever they are and help them fly and land.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. What is your typical client? You said mission-driven, but do you only work with people who are at a certain level in their business? Because earlier I know you had said that you previously you'd worked with people who had a certain amount maybe in their business and they were trying to grow to the next level.
Yeah, we had originally said that we wanted to start working with people at least $500,000 up. And then we found out that with what's going on, that a lot of people are having a lot of ideas. So I really feel that there's influx of ideas and new blood. And so we added another program that's a lot more affordable than what I typically do, that I'm literally in the process of putting the finishing touches on and getting this out there, just because I felt if I have the information, it's not my job to get it in. And so as many people as possible, or am I like being a discriminatory holder of information that only goes to certain people? So that just didn't feel right for me. And I do actually like a younger generation. I also saw that there is such a age bias for people that are older that look like me, especially women. And it really bothers me because it feels that we are being forced into a particular corner. And I have such a sense of, I really want to help this next generation of ideas. Let's be honest here. My ideas are not the best ideas anymore. I had a time when I did that. But I can make other people's ideas fly. That's my skill set today. And so that's when it dawned on me. I realized I'm going to open it up to anyone who is serious, right? I mean, there's certain criteria. I mean, if you want to dilly-dally, if you want to wish it or think it or try it, I'm not the person. But if you say, that's it, I'm burned the bridges, I'm doing it, then I'm the right person for that. And I work in all kinds of industries, really. I don't do a lot of brick and mortar stores. I do a lot of service industries and, a lot of people that are in the consulting space or that, in this particular case, but, LA Vintage is clothing and, I have a couple of people in that, my L background, I guess, comes in handy again. But if it interests me and I can help, I will say so. If I can't, I will also say so. If I know somebody who can better than I do, I will say so. I know a lot of people in the industry. So to answer your question, who is my client? My client is somebody who really wants to make an impact with what they do and they have a really good idea.
Yeah, I love that. There's so many ideas that younger people have. But on the other side, as you mentioned, there are a lot of people who are retiring and now want to become business owners or finally to put forth the idea that they had the whole time that they had their regular 9-to-5 job because that's what they were told to do. And now they're kind of breaking the shackles of that and ready to experience something new for the last section of their life. So I'm interested to see how this all comes together. And is this part of Growth Blocker quiz? Like, can people take the quiz and find out?
Yeah, so the Growth Blocker quiz we designed because we felt that a lot of times people don't know what the next thing is that they need to do in their business. And they go, I don't know what it is, but I know it's something. And it's really 3 things. It's either you don't have systems, you don't have strategy, or you don't have authority. It's one out of those 3 things. So we created this quiz so people could find out what it is. Ever so often, it's so funny. Somebody filled out the quiz and then she said to me, it's not the strategy I'm missing. I need marketing and sales. And I wrote her back. I said, I think that's the definition of strategy.
Just earlier today, I delivered a talk for Meltwater, which is a tool that I use a lot for brand marketing and PR. And it was all about go-to-market strategies. And it was all about how do you make sure that your brand is really strong so then you can elevate. You have to take the time and intentionality to really make sure that you have a strong foundation so that you can have the right sales, marketing, and PR strategies moving forward. So that makes me chuckle.
It is funny. So the Growth Blocker quiz you can find at growthblockerquiz.com and it's free. I invite everybody to just go pop in and see kind of where you are with that. And I would, love to extend to your audience if you heard something and you go, I need to talk to her. I did hire a business growth advisor and, I'll be more than happy to make uncovery sessions available, complimentary 50-minute uncovery sessions to your audience. You just have to make sure you mention the podcast so we give you a priority treatment and just schedule it, uncoverysession.com. We can help you to figure out what it even is that is next. As we are adding this whole piece, we are also working on a certification program for that very purpose, to say that people that want additional income or a side hustle, because we work with so many entrepreneurs, so I hear this over and over and over and over and over again. Well, I know I need to do that, but can't you get me somebody who does it for me? And now we are, because we're going to certify people in the processes we've actually developed around the workflows like podcast promotion, social media, project management, like all the time-consuming stuff that keeps you in the weeds. And we're going to be teaming up with VA companies so that we can train and certify people that want to do this professionally. And then, of course, other people can do the same thing, but so that we can place people, because how happy would you be if you could hire somebody who does nothing other than your podcast promotion and you knew exactly it would take 5 hours a week, not a minute more, and they come with a whole system?
Yes. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Sign me up. Speaking of podcasts, you also are a host of the Business Growth Architect Show. And you're also a best-selling author. You've also been a top 100 global thought leader and one of 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs. So you have a lot of accolades to back up all of the things that you're telling us. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your book and your podcast and what people will find there. And we'll definitely put everything in the show notes.
Yes. So the podcast, The Business Growth Architect Show, is about business strategies. And I get to talk to some very cool people in sales and marketing and branding experts and people mindset that help you to figure out, like, how to figure out like small strategies, so we focus on like one particular thing, not like the overall thing. It's not like a big interview. It's like, what's the one thing that our audience can take away from today? You find it on the Business Growth Architect Show, wherever you pick up the podcast. The book, Happy Woman, Happy World, I wrote after I sold the business to Bill Gates, and then they asked me to become the global director of entertainment. Yeah. And Annika, when I was working in corporate America for whatever the 2 years that I choose to stay afterward, I was shocked how women are treated differently than men in the system. How the single woman is the outcast of society because it somehow must be her fault for having done something bad that drove the good man away. Never mind, he was an alcohol pathological liar. It's always your fault because why did you pick him? Should you not have seen this? Then I'm going, man, this is really, really interesting. And I wanted to write a book for working moms where somebody just finally tells you the truth.
Yes, please.
My daughter is 31. She has her own child now. She has a 3-month-old baby. And nobody tells you what it's like, the hard nights and the doubt and the confidence and the body images and the mental stuff and the guilt you have for working, the guilt you have for not being a good enough mom. Not that you could, even if you wanted to, but maybe you should, but you don't.
Yeah.
It's not an option. So you're always in this mind-blowing conversation of these 50 voices that tell you it's everything but what you do and how you are. And I wanted to just help women to tell them, just take a breath. It's not always going to be like that. It's just now. It's one rhythm at a time. And just focus on this and forget the rest. Just make this the priority. That's how you get through and try to enjoy this rhythm to the maximum.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's something that I think comes up in every day. You feel the guilt, being the single mom, of not having the time, of not being able to go to that activity, whatever it might be. And I feel like as moms in business and entrepreneurs, that is our number one job is, first of all, making sure this other human goes off into the world as a fully formed person, makes mistakes and learns things along the way, but hopefully we can steer them a little bit and guide them. It's hard to balance sometimes, and you have to weigh what's more important today, making more money and having these calls or showing up for your child. So I'm very much looking forward to reading your book. And
it never goes away. To this day, and my daughter certainly knows how to do this, where she's like, well, you always had to work. I said, well, your father didn't pay for like 5 years. Like, how do you think this happened? What's there to discuss if I didn't have the option?
Yeah, it's true. Now, you mentioned that a lot of people are looking into certifications, which I love, because I do think I see that as something that is very much of, especially for a lot of the jobs that are available right now, getting a certification is going to give you the skill set you need. You can't afford to, or you don't want to go to necessarily a 4-year or get a master's or a PhD. You don't necessarily need that, especially for the majority of jobs that are going to be out there and as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up, you see this, and you see more people wanting to start their businesses. And on the other hand, we are getting rumblings about the economy and recession and these other things that we're worried about, the events that are going on in the world. There's so much chaos. I guess, what is the advice that you have for people who are looking to go into entrepreneurship during this time of uncertainty? And what are some steps that they could take, I guess, to recession-proof their business and be able to really achieve their fullness?
So there's 2 things I have to say. So if all of your competitors are not advertising and promoting themselves, what do you think you should do?
Yeah.
You always do the opposite of what everybody else does.
I love that.
If people are buying houses because they're afraid that there's not going to be any houses left, you don't buy. You buy when nobody wants to buy a house because it's cyclical. Mm-hmm. But people seem to forget this in every cycle. It's amazing to me. I mean, I've been through a couple of these actual recessions. We're not technically in a recession.
Right.
Then the second thing I want to say is the universal laws are in accordance with the actual laws of nature and the world. Everything is ruled by the same laws, like the laws that apply here as well. Have you ever seen a tree who goes and says, on certain times, I'm going to only sprout about 100 leaves?
No.
And I'm going to wait for a couple of weeks. Let's just see what the reception of the 100 leaves is. If people are going to stand, they look at it, said, these are good leaves. Then I'm going to do a slow rollout over the next couple months. And then I'm going to roll out 100 at a time. Let's not waste our resources. It doesn't exist in nature.
Mm-mm.
The wait and see does not exist in nature. Well, I'm a little bit hungry right now. I don't know. Should I eat now? Should I eat later? Should I go look for food? Doesn't exist in nature. I better be looking for food now because I know I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to be better hunting when I'm not so cranky that I'm scaring whatever my prey off. So you have to also be very disciplined with yourself and say, am I finding an excuse that's commonly acceptable? And then everybody's going to say, yeah, like me, I could have given up 50 times and people would have said, Beate, no problem.
Yeah.
You have every right to give up. It's not normal that one single person has to overcome so much hardship. But I make no excuses. So how bad do you want it? That's really the main decision. If you don't want it bad enough, yeah, sure, it's dangerous out there. God knows what can happen to you. But what if you miss your opportunity because you're at home binging on Netflix, waiting for something to get better that you don't even know what exactly it is?
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Can you talk about the 5-star success blueprint?
Yes. So the 5-star success blueprint is part of, the origin story of growth architecture. And we looked at this and I said, well, what do people get wrong when they build a business? And how can I put this in the simplest possible terms so people really understand how easy it is to build a business? So number 1, it is your idea. What is my idea? Why is this idea unique? Why am I the right person to have this idea? Who is my client? And what is the problem that they're having?
Well,
does my product service solve this problem?
Yeah.
Until you have figured this out, you do nothing. Then you go to the second, and the second is the offer. When you know who you're selling to, what the problem is, and you know what you can solve, now you can create the offer. Because then the offer is geared to solving that exact problem. Then and only then do you get to the third step, which is the systems. Then and only then are you buying anything, investing in anything, or building anything, because then you know what you need to run as a system that operates that offer that solves the problem for that client. And then and only then are you allowed to hire people that then operate the systems, that manage the offer, that solves the problem for your client. And then and only then are you going to look at yourself as a leader and said, who do I need to be to run this team that manages those systems, that manages my offers, that solve my client's problems?
That level of clarity, I'm going, I wish I'd had that when I accidentally started my PR agency during the pandemic. I would have still had that business instead of merging with other people's businesses and doing other things.
Yeah, it's that simple, really.
Amazing. There is so much more I could ask you, but I want to leave a little bit for the audience to go check out your website, connect with you on LinkedIn perhaps, take the quiz, listen to the podcast, and also read your book. So Beate, thank you so much. This has been so inspirational for me, and I feel like so full of energy and excited about what I want to do and what I want to put in the world. And without even having gone through it with you, I feel like I'm already on the path, and I'm further along on the path just from this conversation. So this has been really delightful. I do want to ask, do you have a quote, mantra, family motto, some words of wisdom that help you get through each day, or that you really are part of your value system?
Yeah, so there's really 2. So number 1, don't drown in a puddle. And the second is, there are a million ways to be successful. You only need to find one, your own.
Oh. And with that, I don't think there's anything else that we really could say. A lot for everybody to digest in this episode. Thank you, Beate, for being here. Thank you to the audience for coming back for another episode, watching, listening, wherever you are, whether it's on Traverse TV, 360 Talk Radio for Women, your favorite podcast platform, perhaps. I really appreciate it. And I will see you in a few more days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.